In 2010, we began thinking about creating a project that would go beyond our traditional work in the criminal justice area, deepening the conversation about race in this country, both inside and outside of the criminal justice system. We wanted to kind of begin educating people about things related to racial history that we didn't think most people knew. And we wanted to just have a more informed conversation about where we are in this country when it comes to race and racial inequality. There is an historical context that's really key to understanding these issues. You can't understand the plight of African Americans in America without first understanding slavery and the trauma and the degradation that slavery created. And you can't understand the next century without understanding African Americans were subjected to terror from the end of Reconstruction until World War II, lynching and convict leasing and the threats of daily racial violence. And then, of course, the segregation era, the Jim Crow era, where we talk a lot about the laws, but we don't talk about the daily humiliation that African Americans had to internalize, of constantly being marginalized, constantly being talked down, constantly being disrespected, and what that did to people and their psyche. And also what it did to majority people who were actually being taught that they were better than other people because of their skin color. It's really an abusive thing to do. And then finally, mass incarceration, where we have actually acculturated whole segments of our society into believing that incarceration is inevitable. All of that became something that we felt the need to address in a more detailed and nuanced way, understanding the legacy of that history. What does it mean to have enslaved people in this country for over 2 centuries? What does it mean to have traumatized African Americans for decades through legalized racial segregation and subordination? What does that era mean for us today? What does it represent? We wanted to seriously engage in truth and reconciliation. Countries that have suffered from decades and centuries of human rights abuses have not been able to move forward without committing themselves to a process of truth and reconciliation. In Rwanda, you've seen this. After the genocide, hundreds of thousands of people killed. You saw folks saying, no, we've got to talk about this in a way that was aimed at trying to get to reconciliation. In South Africa, at the end of apartheid, there was a recognition that that country could not move forward without an opportunity to give voice to what apartheid had done to them. And then people could talk about, now how do we move forward? And we didn't do that in this country. At the end of the civil rights struggle, we changed some laws, but we refused to talk about what had happened. And because we didn't talk about it, we created this dynamic in America where there's all this tension, all of this conflict, all of this division. The legacy continues to haunt us. We are still very racially polarized. And that polarization manifests itself in day-to-day life. It's very difficult to go any place in America where you have racial diversity without finding racial conflict. We're not going to move forward on issues like race until we tell the truth about our history. And we're not going to be able to reconcile ourselves to that history until we deal more honestly with what that history has done. To all of us, not just people of color, to all of us.